Hi students, and welcome to this culture task for English 6. I am your teacher Erjan Elmasovsky, and I, together with the 3 other teachers, will give you the necessary tools to complete the task at hand. Tradition then and now is the name of this task. What exactly is tradition? In simplified terms, tradition is a way of thinking, behaving or doing that has been used in a group for a long period of time. For example, to partake in Halloween is a form of tradition. Christians going to church every Sunday is a form of tradition. Even sitting down and eating tacos every Friday with your family is a form of tradition. Now, what you have to do in this task is to look at a more common tradition that is practiced within bigger groups of people. For instance, Christmas, Thanksgiving, St. Patrick's Day, and so on. Then you have to inspect it in order to figure out how was it practiced in the past versus how it is practiced now. Try to find some key aspects of what has changed and what has stayed the same. For this task, we want you to be 2 people, and together you will hold a presentation that is approximately 10 minutes long. The core presentation, where you present your work, being 6 minutes, and the other 4 minutes you will have a short discussion with the entire class where you ask yourself why these changes might have occurred. Before you do the presentation, you also have to write a 1 to 2 pages long summary. This summary will contain the presentation in written form, so the teacher will know what your presentation will be about before you do it. You might ask yourselves why you would do this task. The reason why we want you to study a tradition is so you can understand that culture is dynamic. In other words, it always changes. And we also want you to see how broad culture really is. The reason why we're doing a presentation is so you can be able to speak comfortably in front of people, and with the help of the discussion, do some critical thinking that can help you not only understand how it has changed, but why.
Hi guys! The task for you is to study a tradition which is 50 years or older. You're going to study how it was celebrated back then and how it's celebrated now. Then compare the different ways of practice and present your conclusions. For example, one particular tradition is the celebration of St. Lucy. In this country, we have been celebrating it since the late 14th century, and back then, the 13th of December was the longest night of the year, and people were afraid that supernatural events would transpire. Whereas today, it's celebrated in a completely different way. As you can see, it's very interesting to compare the same tradition in different time eras, and it gives a very dynamic perspective of the tradition. To conclude, you need to present background information on the subject, you need to summarize how the tradition was practiced back then and how it's practiced now, and finally, you need to conclude what cultural changes there have been.
Hello, I will now show you a sample paper, written in the same format as you should write your papers. We have given you the sample paper beforehand, and as you can see, it contains an introduction, a paragraph describing how the tradition was practiced in the past, and 1 paragraph describing how it is practiced today. It closes up with a conclusion, repeating what has been said in the paper in 1 short paragraph. At the end of the paper, you can see a reference section, which you should implement too. If you are uncertain of how to write your papers, you can take inspiration from our sample paper. Now I'll do a paragraph by paragraph analysis for you on the example paper. Here we see the title. It's not very interesting, but it reveals the topic. Your title does not have to be very eye-catching. Here we see the introduction paragraph, telling us when the tradition spawned, as well as why and how it started out. Here is a continuation of how the tradition was practiced in the past, as well as a connection to how the tradition plays out today. This paragraph explains something that changed this tradition very greatly, and it also explains why this change happened. It also expresses some development made because of this change. This section complements the previous paragraph by telling us more extensively what this big change led to. This is an explicit comparison between the past and present practices of the tradition, where we can see the earliest massive changes that are still around today. Here is a short and concise conclusion, repeating what has been said previously in the paper. Finally, this paper ends with a reference section, something that you must implement into your paper. Remember to use reliable sources such as these on the screen. If you ever doubt how to write your paper, just look at this sample paper and you should be okay. If you still can't figure out how to write your paper, you can always see this video again. Additionally, remember to not be too wordy. We only want you to write what is necessary, so 2 full pages is the most you should write.
What sources and materials should we use? The oral presentation can be backed up with any visual aids necessary, provided it doesn't overshadow the presentation itself, and the students maintain eye contact with the audience. You will be required to use reliable sources when working on and presenting your work. These sources should be provided to the teacher in a handout after the presentation. Why should we learn this? The curriculum states that a student should be able to choose text from different media and be able to use it in a relevant material, in this case an oral presentation. The theme of this assignment also relates to the curriculum, stating that the students should be able to, in simple terms, discuss different contexts and cultures in parts of the world where the English language is being used, and be able to make comparisons with their own knowledge. What are the criteria for the oral presentation? The student should be able to present the information in a way that everybody understands and able to fully process the information. The information should be traceable back to its original source, but the student should be able to explain in their own words. Why should we apply this knowledge to our everyday life? Because it is important to be able to understand the different cultures and their traditions, in order to get a wide perspective of the diversity of the world's vast range of various cultures. How can we apply this knowledge to our everyday life? You can implement this knowledge by interacting with other people from other cultures than your own. For example, by striking a conversation with someone whose culture you studied, and being able to relate to the cultural content in that conversation.